Hi guys, I'm EVM and welcome to a very sunny Yorkshire. Brilliant start to the day. Anyway, this is the MG full electric EZS and I've had more messages from people about this than any other car in my entire time on YouTube. I think people are wanting to know, at the price this is at, is it cheap for a reason or is it just incredible value? I'm about to find out. Okay, let's have a look around the outside of this thing. It's got quite the grille. It's got a huge mouth at the front of the car. Obviously, it's another SUV because that's all manufacturers seem to be producing these days. I have to say it looks slightly better in the flesh than it does on pictures. And I would probably go for a darker colour. I think in a darker colour this car looks just a little bit nicer, but I don't mind this too much. You can probably see from the front there that this massive grill thing here is how you get to the charging port, but you'll probably notice I'm having to crouch down. It's CCS charging, you can just make out there. When you come up to charge your car at night, you can't see the charging point because it's all the way back there. So although it looks quite good and quite effective, you can't really get to it without kind of bending down. So that's not really a major disaster, is it? But it is something worth noting. The rest of the looks are pretty standard fare for an SUV. Chunky styling, roof rails over there, silver highlights. Again, this is the top spec. So if you go around the back, I mean, let's face it, it's kind of like every other SUV on the road. If you were driving up behind this on the motorway or something like that, unless you knew your cars, you probably wouldn't know what this was. Apart from the massive clue that says MG there, of course. Now, there's only me to try and figure out how big this boot is, but let's have a look. That's actually pretty, almost cavernous. You'd definitely get 2 Harrys in that, and maybe 1.5 Simons. If you don't know what I'm on about, then watch my other review videos. Charging cables can go underneath the floor, so there's a little bit of storage there. So it's not flat load kind of bay, but that is very deep, and I have to say very practical as well. Definitely comparable to the Kia e-Niro in boot size, maybe even a fraction bigger. Now, to give you an idea on how big this car is, it is near as damn it pretty much the same size as a Kia e-Niro. So that looks good on the practicality front, and I have to say it doesn't look as big in the flesh again as it does on the pictures, but it does kind of keep its proportions quite nicely. It's not the best looking car in the world, no SUV for me ever will be, but again, I think it's fine. There is one problem, however, which I think will put some type of buyers off, and that is this over here. It's the MG badge. That, I think, is going to be the biggest sticking point for people thinking about buying this car, which is probably why a lot of people are wanting to know how good it is, or not, because it's an unknown entity, if I can get the words out of my mouth. MG, of course, used to be an English brand and they failed, producing terrible, terrible cars. They're now Chinese owned and they don't have a reputation, so we're kind of starting from scratch. Inside, I'll jump in and yeah, so far it looks actually quite good, but I'll come to that in a second. In the back, again, pretty spacious back there. This is the exclusive top spec trim, of course. And, ooh, listen to that. Remember that advert? Sounds like a Golf? Well, I would say it almost sounds like a Golf. It's not far behind, to be honest. The only clue as to its electric nature, of course, is this blue badge there and the charging point at the front. So, yeah, from the back, it's not the best looking. From the front, it's not the best looking. But quite frankly, anybody that owns an SUV, if you're thinking of getting a good-looking car, you're in the wrong sector. Right, let's go inside and see what it's like on the interior of this thing. Let's start with the steering wheel. Feels alright to me. It's nothing special, but again, I can't say I've got any problems with this. Decent tactile buttons, and yeah, it's not impressive, but it's not bad either. Buttons down here, they feel pretty solid, to be fair, but you know, they're just relatively cheap plastic. There's a bit of cheap plastic going on there, but again, what I expect. The binnacle display has gone for they've gone for the traditional kind of dials rather than what a lot of manufacturers are doing these days in terms of putting like a big HD display in the middle there. But it's, you know, it's easy to read and you can flick through the various stuff pretty easily using the buttons, which I'll show you in a second. That is a little bit loose. Top here, the materials can kind of squeeze. It's quite hard, but you know what? That's not too bad. I don't mind that at all. These are a little bit loose, but I don't think they're going anywhere. The interactive touch display. Now, the music's not too bad in terms of how you operate it, but it is slow when you get to the sat-nav. For example, I click on that, and then it has to load up. Come on, come on. Still loading, still loading. Still loading. And we are there, finally. So it's not the quickest thing in the world. It's not the best sat-nav in the world, if I'm perfectly honest. But it does do Apple and Android CarPlay. So I'd probably just stick with my Google Maps, to be honest. The gear selector down here is actually very good and tactile. I do like that. Park, reverse, neutral and drive, of course. And look at this, a KERS button. Any Formula 1 fans will quite like that. This changes the mode, so if I go back to this display, you can go from, obviously, Eco to Sport mode. If I press the KERS button, it changes that bit down there where you can see that little bit number. That basically changes the level of regen. And if you press the battery button, of course, it tells you how much charge you've got left on the battery. Climate control has moved down. Again, fairly standard. Buttons, nothing to be excited about. Not exactly high-end, but not low-end either, kind of average-ish, and quite easy to use, crucially for me. When you're driving as well, I kind of like the tactile buttons on a car these days rather than kind of touch interfaces. A little bit of black gloss around here and here, so that's liable to get a few scratches and fingerprints, which is my biggest annoyance in nearly every single car that you go into. Nice place for your phone there, so it doesn't slip around, and nicely just fits an iPhone Plus quite nicely, actually. If we go further back, we have some cup holders there, of course, a little bit more storage. That's not too bad, actually, I don't mind that. And a bit more storage back here. That's a little bit cheap, but not something that I'm kind of really bothered about. Glove box. You get your gloves in there, certainly. Quite deep, and you'll get a few things in there. It's actually a vaguely usable glove box, so that's not too bad. Probably sit a bit better there. So you've got the storage here and storage under there. So there's plenty of places to stick your junk. And in terms of bottle, you'll get a normal bottle in there, but I'm not sure if you get a big one. So yeah, it's reasonably practical, but nothing amazing. The seats in this, exclusive trim, leather of course, or at least leather-esque, and yeah, I have to say they're comfortable and pretty standard fare. Again, everything is kind of standard fare, I suppose. Now, not normally too bothered about sunroofs really, but that one opens, that one doesn't. But I imagine from the back that actually makes the whole car feel a lot airier than normal, and you know, bigger than it is. But overall, I have to say, I'm actually quite impressed with this. It's not amazing quality. There are some really cheap bits, but again, I guess it's about expectations, and for what I expect at this price bracket, it definitely meets them. I would say it's better than I thought it would be, to be honest. Okay, the chair is where I would sit, where I would have it. There's a little bit of rail there, but I can man spread, shall we say. I've got tons of room here, tons of room. So plenty of space in the back. It's actually extremely practical. It does remind me of the e-Niro in terms of usable space. You have a USB slot there for the kids to annoy you with their own iPad kind of music stuff, and a little bit of a cubbyhole as well. So yeah, actually, it's a pretty nice, spacious place to be. There's the front end, and I think it's time to take this out for a drive. There is a little bit more road noise than in, say, other EVs like the Leaf or the e-Niro, the Kona, but it's quieter than a traditional petrol car, certainly, so it's somewhere in between. So it's not the quietest car in the world. There's a bit of road noise, a bit of tyre noise. It does wallow a little bit when you're kind of going around bends. There's a bit of a lean there, and if you get a kind of undulation on the road, it takes a few seconds to settle, but you know what? It's a decent size SUV, so I'm not really after hot hatch handling. It basically does what it says on the tin at the moment. It's comfortable. I've been in this a fair while now, and I don't feel like I've got any back pain coming on or anything like that. It soaks up bumps reasonably well. so far so good. The normal price for the EZS is 25 for the Excite trim and 27 for this exclusive trim, which is the top spec version. But for the moment, MG have matched the government grant and you're getting an extra £3,500 off the price of the cars. So you can get the basic version, or the less spec one anyway, for £21,500, and this exclusive version for just £23,500. Now initially it was restricted to the first 1,000 customers and they went very quickly, and then they extended it to the first 2,000 customers. I've just been told by MG themselves that although one of them may drop to £3,000 instead of a £3,500 discount, there will be some sort of decent discount. Basically, it's going to have a £3,000 or £3,500 discount until the end of the year. So, if you are thinking about getting one of these, you don't have to rush out and try and get in before the first 2,000. However, I would probably not hang around. The EV market is very new, as are MG themselves in this kind of Chinese-owned brand. So they're clearly doing this to get into the market, to get people familiar with the brand. So when it comes to electric is normal, people will look at MG as an incredible value version. As a Yorkshireman, I'm for great value. And I have to say, I can't really argue with this one. When you want it to, it don't hang about. Granted, it's wet, but it really has no trouble of spinning its wheels if you put your foot down in sports mode. 0 to 60 is 9 seconds-ish. And I have to say, that's pretty good for an SUV like this, of this size. I'm not expecting it to be fast, but you know, in urban environments like this, it's more than enough. 140 brake horsepower, I believe it's got, and with the added instant torque of the electric motor, I don't think anybody would have any problems with it, saying it's too slow or it's like a milk float or anything like that. It's quicker than my Nissan Leaf, which granted isn't saying much, but you get my point. It doesn't feel a big car either, actually. I've got very good visibility. The overhang, you know, the bonnet doesn't seem massive or anything like that. The back ain't great at the rear quarter, I must admit. There's quite a significant chunk of metal between you and the corners, but you've got a reversing camera, at least in this trim. There we go. And that means I can let the rain in. Now, compared to my 30 kWh Nissan Leaf, the interior is, well, quite a step up, I would say. But that's not a big thing, because that obviously is an old car that's no longer sold. But I have to say, I don't mind this interior at all. It's got definitely some cheap bits dotted around. Dials are easy to read. It's not got the best kind of digital displays in the world. This looks like a cheap Android tablet compared to some of the competitors' setups. It's you know, it's not brilliant, I have to say, but it can do Apple or Android CarPlay, so that's enough for me. There's a bit of money saving going on in terms of the materials used in this car, but not to the point where it puts you off buying it. This car could probably call itself the MG Yorkshire Edition. It does what it says on the tin, and it doesn't cost you the earth in the first place. Perfect. If you're looking basically for an EV in the mid-20s price bracket, or less in this case, then it's only really got what? The Nissan Leaf 40 kWh, maybe the smaller battery version Kona, although that's a few grand extra, well, several £1,000s extra if you look at the launch price. So it's kind of difficult. I would say its main competitor is probably the Nissan Leaf 40. I have to say, hand on heart, that if I had a choice between the 40 kWh Leaf and this, because the ranges are practically identical, then I would go for this, hands down, absolutely. It's even got battery cooling. I would say that in the price bracket, if you're in for an EV, this has got to be the leader. And at the £23,500 for this fully spec version, it's a bargain. I mean, seriously, there are faults with this. There are cheap parts. There are, you know, it's a basic car. It does what it says on the tin. I've said that before, but I'll say it again. And nothing puts me off this car. It's worth every penny, and you're not spending many pennies getting it. Now I said earlier that this should be called the MG Yorkshire Edition, but actually I think this should be called something else. This should be called the MG Aldi Edition. I think MG are definitely missing out on a trick here. The MG Aldi Edition, and that's because there's nothing wrong with the product at all, but the main reason people probably don't shop at Aldi is because it's Aldi. It's the name. That's the biggest problem this car is going to have with selling itself. I used to know somebody that shopped at Aldi, loved the products there, but always put the shopping in a Sainsbury's bag. And that's kind of what this is. It's nothing to do with the failed British brand it was before. It's a Chinese-owned brand, yes, and that's an unknown entity at this time. Availability should be good. If you order one now, for example, you're looking at probably February-ish. But its biggest challenge is winning people over, because you can't put a car in a Sainsbury's shopping bag on your drive. I imagine people will be going, yes, I actually quite like this car. It's well within budget. I wanted an electric vehicle, but it is an MG, and the neighbours will know I've bought an MG. As I've kind of alluded to earlier, I've had a lot of messages about this car, and I would say, you know what, don't worry about it. The launch price, absolutely, total bargain. I'm not going to go as far as to say at the £27,000 price bracket to get this, because that's about right, that's about what it's worth. But its launch price, it's a bargain. However, if you come across this and it's at its normal price, I would absolutely recommend you to test drive it. See for yourself what it's like. Yes, it's not the best interior in the world, but neither was my Nissan Leaf, and I've had two over the last 4.5 years. The Renault Zoe, brilliant car, great value. Not the best interior compared to, you know, other cars that you can get. So I guess it depends on whether or not you're a snob. It all comes down to that, doesn't it? If the MG badge puts you off, it doesn't matter how good this car is. However, I think, like those that chose Skoda, you know, a year or two after Volkswagen took over from it, if you're that sort of person, this will be perfect for you. And it's a great entry level into an EV. So there you go. Right, guys, thanks for watching as usual. Sorry about the rain. It's unusual in Yorkshire, is that? I can't imagine where it's come from. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you soon. And if you're thinking about putting a deposit down on this, just do it. It's refundable. You can always ask for it back. Right, once again, thank you and bye-bye.